Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into the twisted stories of some of the most inbred women in medieval history. Ladies born from cousins, married off to uncles, and sometimes both, all caught in the royal obsession of keeping everything in the family, both politically and genetically. Before we get settled, take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy the content here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always amazing to see where everyone is tuning in from across the world. Now, lower the lights, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, and let's ease ourselves into tonight's fascinating journey. Juana of Castile came into the world in 1479 as the third child of two extremely important yet very closely related individuals, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the same powerful pair who funded Columbus, expelled the Moors, and somehow believed that marrying cousins was still a solid strategic plan. Juana was part of the Trastamara dynasty, which had already made a habit of marrying within the bloodline. By the time Juana arrived, the royal lineage was stirred just enough to remain alive, but not enough to avoid issues like emotional instability, deep melancholy, and the occasional unfortunate chin. In her teenage years, Juana was sent off to Flanders to marry Philip the Handsome, who, despite the name, was more about genetic optimization as a Habsburg than true handsomeness. He was, of course, her cousin, because the Habsburgs adored two things: collecting crowns and ignoring genetic red flags. At first, it seemed promising. Juana was intelligent, striking, and reportedly felt deeply for Philip. Unfortunately, Philip seemed more interested in every woman who wasn't his wife, and Juana's passionate and jealous nature didn't align well with a court that was accustomed to cold marriages and lukewarm loyalty. When Philip died suddenly, allegedly from typhoid but possibly karma, Juana didn't take it well. She refused to part from his corpse, literally having his coffin carried with her across Spain, occasionally opening it to check on him. Medieval romantic, or perhaps unhinged. Her political enemies, of which there were many, seized on her behavior. Her father Ferdinand used it as proof that she was unfit to rule, and her son Charles, later Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, did the same. Conveniently, both men ruled in her place while Juana was confined to a convent for most of her life. Was Juana truly mad? Historians still debate it. Some believe she suffered from mental illness worsened by grief and confinement, while others argue she was simply politically inconvenient in a world where being an emotional woman, especially one who noticed her husband's affairs, was practically considered treason. Regardless, Juana was not just a tragic figure. She was the perfect storm of dynastic pressure, family inbreeding, and the world's worst coping mechanisms. If there were an award for the most predictable genetic result, Maria Anna of Spain would be holding it, while her son drooled on it. Born in 1634, Maria Anna was the daughter of King Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, who were themselves cousins in that enthusiastic Habsburg way. So naturally, Maria Anna married her actual uncle, not a distant cousin or a second cousin twice removed, but her direct uncle, Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. Because if your family tree is just a circle, why not double down? Maria Anna was intelligent, devout, multilingual, politically aware, and reportedly kind-hearted, bringing dignity to the imperial court along with the genetic equivalent of photocopying a photocopy. Her most notable historical contribution was giving birth to Charles II of Spain, arguably the most inbred monarch ever to sit on a throne without falling off. Charles inherited the entire Habsburg gene backlog: an oversized jaw, a weak chin, chronic illness, infertility, and suspected cognitive delays. He struggled with basic functions like eating and speaking, which, to be fair, is relatable before coffee, but less so when you're running a global empire. Was all of this Maria Anna's fault? Of course not. She didn't invent Habsburg matchmaking, but she played her part in the family's tradition of turning political alliances into genetic experiments. To her credit, she loved and protected her son throughout his fragile life, acting as regent during his minority and trying to shield him from court manipulation, which was like trying to stop a food fight in a room of starving toddlers with knives. Maria Anna died in 1696, a year after her son, and the Spanish Empire she helped birth into decline soon collapsed into the War of Spanish Succession, a conflict sparked in part because Charles II couldn't produce an heir. Because of course he couldn't. If you've ever wondered what happens when a family treats marriage like an Excel spreadsheet formula, Isabella of Habsburg is your answer. Born in 1501, Isabella was the daughter of Philip the Handsome, yes, him again, and Juana of Castile, also known as Joanna the Mad, though at that point, Joanna the understandably stressed might have been more accurate. This made Isabella the sister of Emperor Charles V and the niece of half of Europe. Her DNA was less a mystery and more a royal recipe repeated too many times. A base of Habsburg, a sprinkle of Trastamara, and absolutely no fresh ingredients. At 17, Isabella married Christian II of Denmark, a king known for reform attempts, erratic behavior, and the general aura of a man one bad breakfast away from declaring war on his furniture. Their marriage was predictably both strategic and deeply awkward. They were, of course, cousins, but what really sealed the genetic deal was that her Habsburg bloodline was already looping like a medieval screensaver. She was expected to bring stability, charm, and political advantage while subtly disguising the fact that her family tree was starting to look like a wreath. Life in the Danish court was unkind to Isabella. Christian's rule went poorly. He was overthrown, imprisoned, and exiled. Isabella loyally followed him, which was either true love or hereditary stubbornness. Her health declined under the stress, and she died young at 24, likely due to complications from childbirth or illness worsened by political chaos. Their children, naturally, continued the noble tradition of inbreeding, with one, Dorothea, marrying Frederick II Elector Palatine, a classic Habsburg match, because if the dynasty valued anything more than jawlines and titles, it was ensuring that family gatherings would never need name tags. Margaret of Austria came into the world in 1480, the only daughter of Emperor Maximilian of Austria and Mary of Burgundy. Born a Habsburg, her family tree looked like a circular doodle crafted by a toddler with a crown. From day one, Margaret's life was about political strategy and presentation. At just 3 years old, she was promised to Charles VII of France, only to be returned at 12 like a gift that didn't fit when Charles decided to marry Anne of Brittany instead, whose territories were more appealing. Though embarrassed, Margaret kept her composure and reportedly declared, "I shall have my revenge." To her credit, she later managed to rule a large portion of Europe. Her second engagement was to Juan of Castile, the son of Ferdinand and Isabella, who was also her cousin, of course. This match was meant to strengthen ties between the Habsburgs and Spain while ensuring the royal bloodline stayed as concentrated as possible. One passed away shortly after they married, leaving Margaret widowed before 20, rejected by two husbands, one by choice and the other by fate. She had other offers, including one from a son of Henry VIII, but Margaret declined them all, officially stepping away from the endless royal marriage market. Instead, she devoted her life to governance, the arts, and simply outliving her relatives, a notable achievement in itself. As governor of the Netherlands, appointed by her nephew Charles V, Margaret managed the region with a mix of sharp diplomacy, intelligence, and characteristic Habsburg determination. She negotiated treaties, kept volatile provinces under control, and was among the rare women in Europe trusted with real authority, partly due to her Habsburg name and partly because she wasn't occupied producing heirs for her uncle's cousins. Despite the constant family drama around her, Margaret's life was free of major scandals. She supported music, collected art, and tried to teach young Charles the essentials of ruling, a challenging task, considering he became emperor at 19 and was related to nearly every ruler in Europe. Margaret's life ended in 1530 when a minor foot injury became fatal, as medieval medicine often turned minor issues into death sentences. She remains one of the rare Habsburg women remembered for her effective leadership rather than her family connections, though her lineage was undeniably deeply inbred. Blanche of Castile was born in 1188, during an era when noble families saw cousin marriages as strategic rather than genetic risks. She was the granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England, and the daughter of King Alfonso VIII of Castile and Eleanor of England, arriving in the world with more royal blood than most could imagine. Before she was even walking, her family was plotting which relative would become her husband, with the winner being Louis VIII of France, her cousin. They shared close family ties, but in medieval royalty, if your future spouse wasn't already a branch on your family tree, it was considered poor politics. At age 12, Blanche traveled to France to marry Louis, whose father, King Philip II, supposedly remarked, "She is small, but she will grow." Their marriage in 1200 launched Blanche into a life of navigating dynastic strategies and religious duties while overlooking the fact that her husband's ancestors were also hers. Blanche was far more than a ceremonial queen. When Louis became king, she served as queen consort, and after his death, She ruled as regent for her son, Louis IX, who would later be canonized as Saint Louis. Blanche managed France with the insight of someone fully aware of the instability that came with her family's complicated ties. She organized crusades, quelled rebellions, and maintained stability in a kingdom where many doubted her simply because she was a woman with stronger Castilian connections than they preferred. She handled them with a mix of diplomacy, firmness, and occasionally house arrest. Genetically, Blanche was the product of centuries of European royal consolidation, combining English, Castilian, and French lines into one determined ruler. If DNA had warning lights, hers would have been flashing constantly. She was deeply religious, fiercely protective of her children, and far from someone to underestimate. While Louis IX earned sainthood, it was Blanche who ensured he lived long enough to receive it. Anne of Bohemia in Hungary was born in 1503, a time when being a Habsburg meant entering the world with a crown and a family reunion already running through your veins. Her parents were Vladislaus II of Hungary and Bohemia and Anne of Foix-Candel. Though the second Anne might have seemed like a breath of genetic fresh air, the reality was that Anne's future was still a carefully arranged tangle of repeated royal connections. From a young age, Anne knew she would eventually be married off as part of a diplomatic alliance. At 18, she married her double first cousin, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, who would later become Ferdinand I, Holy Roman Emperor. Yes, double first cousin, meaning they shared both sets of grandparents, essentially a mirror match. While modern society would raise eyebrows at marrying such a close relative, in the Habsburg world, it ensured dynastic stability regardless of the biological risks involved. Despite these risks, their marriage was politically beneficial, uniting the Habsburgs with Hungary and Bohemia while producing 15 children. Yes, 15. If the goal was to consolidate the royal bloodline, Anne accomplished it thoroughly. She was described as devout, kind, and dutiful, which essentially meant she accepted her role as the glue in a massive European political puzzle. Anne accompanied Ferdinand on various imperial campaigns and held court across multiple regions, ensuring the Habsburgs' dominance wherever they went. Unfortunately, Anne died in 1547, likely worn out from years of childbirth and political duty while pretending her family wasn't deeply in love with itself. She did not live to see Ferdinand crowned Holy Roman Emperor, but her legacy cemented Habsburg control over Central Europe. Anne of Bohemia in Hungary's life exemplified elite inbreeding, born into a dynasty that prioritized territory over health and stability over sanity, yet still managed to produce half of Europe's emperors. Maria Theresa of Austria arrived in 1717, the only surviving child of Emperor Charles VI. At her birth, the royal court barely celebrated since she wasn't a male heir, but Charles, ever hopeful, or perhaps naive about European politics, issued the Pragmatic Sanction, a grand imperial decree that declared, yes, she's a woman, but she will still inherit the empire. Spoiler, Europe wasn't thrilled about it. When Charles VI died in 1740, Maria Theresa took control of the vast Habsburg territories in a diplomatic disaster. Nearly every European power disputed her right to rule, simply because she had the nerve to wear a crown while being a woman, and, surprisingly, hadn't yet married her first cousin. Actually, scratch that, she sort of had. Maria Theresa married Francis Stephen of Lorraine, who was technically a distant cousin naturally. Their marriage led to 16 children, future kings, emperors, queens, and even Marie Antoinette, yes, the let them eat cake one. With so many children, Maria Theresa didn't just pass down the throne, she passed down an entire library of chromosomes. But don't be mistaken, she wasn't a pampered monarch hiding behind velvet curtains. Maria Theresa was one of the era's most formidable rulers, reforming the military, revamping the tax system, streamlining the government, and improving education, all while being pregnant nearly every other year. Her level of multitasking would make even today's supermoms feel like part-timers. Yet, she was still a Habsburg, which meant strict Catholic values, a knack for micromanagement, and a persistent habit of marrying her children back into the same circle of royal families, further tightening the already tangled Habsburg web across Europe. She ruled until her death in 1780, outliving her husband, navigating numerous wars, and ensuring that the Habsburg name remained stamped across Europe for generations. Her son, Joseph II, who became Holy Roman Emperor, inherited not only her empire but her stubborn legacy, carrying it into the Enlightenment. Yolande of Aragon was born in 1384, destined for royalty from the cradle to the grave. As the daughter of King John I of Aragon and Violent of Bar, she carried more noble titles than most people have teeth, and her family tree resembled a looping root system, where many relatives were also potential suitors. Her upbringing was nothing short of regal. She was sharp, politically insightful, and, by medieval standards, dangerously outspoken, making her both a valuable dynastic asset and a challenge to anyone expecting a passive queen. She married Louis II of Anjou, a French prince, and yes, her cousin, because nothing screamed medieval love like shared great-grandparents. As Duchess of Anjou and Queen Consort of Naples in name only, Yolande was not one to simply sit quietly and embroider crests. She was the strategist behind alliances, the funder of armies, and one of the few royals to support Joan of Arc while surviving the political fallout. While Louis roamed Europe chasing crowns he couldn't secure, Yolande managed affairs at home, raising armies, striking deals, overseeing estates, and acting as the true authority in Anjou. Her children, predictably, married into other royal families, often cousins, and she ensured they had both political power and just enough Habsburg lineage to remain legitimate. Her son, René of Anjou, became known as the Good, likely because he inherited her intelligence and only part of the family's complicated genetics. Her daughter, Marie, married Charles VII of France, giving Yolande influence over the French throne and allowing her to guide Joan of Arc's campaigns without lifting a sword. Yolande wasn't just a name stitched onto a royal family tree. She was a powerful figure, working behind the scenes while kings and generals postured, often correcting their plans quietly. She died in 1442, having outlasted husbands, enemies, and the worst of the 100 Years' War. Yes, she was inbred, but she was also calculating, sharp, and just as influential, if not more, than the kings she skillfully outmaneuvered. Margaret of York was born in 1446 to Richard Plantagenet, Duke of York, and Cecily Neville, a pair so noble they could barely enter a room without tripping over their titles. As the sister of Edward IV, Richard III, and a central figure in the Wars of the Roses, Margaret's blood was programmed for intrigue, decisive action, and political alliances. Naturally, she married Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, a man famous for his ambition, military obsession, and, importantly, for being yet another cousin within Europe's royal loop. Their marriage in 1468 wasn't about romance. It was about unsettling France. Margaret brought English prestige, while Charles brought a sharp beard and relentless determination. Despite its political nature, their marriage was reportedly respectful and even functional, a rarity in arranged unions. Margaret adapted well to the Burgundian court, which was less medieval gloom and more pre-Renaissance glamour, with tapestries, silks, tiny dogs, and a love for embroidery. Her diplomatic and management skills earned her the title, the Great Lady of the Netherlands. She hosted dignitaries, managed court finances, and handled official correspondence, while Charles waged wars he rarely finished. After Charles predictably died in battle, Margaret didn't retreat from public life. Instead, she stepped up, becoming regent and protector for her stepdaughter, Mary of Burgundy, and an advisor to her stepson-in-law, Maximilian of Austria. Yes, the same Maximilian who married Mary, further weaving the Habsburg name into Europe. Though Margaret had no biological children, her political influence shaped dynastic Europe. She helped raise Philip the Handsome, who married Joanna the Mad and became the father of Charles V. If you're curious where the Habsburg dynasty's ambitious streak started, Margaret had a hand in shaping it. She died in 1503, outliving her brothers, most of her adversaries, and the fading splendor of Burgundy. She didn't add a new thread to the inbred family tapestry, but she certainly tightened it with impeccable diplomacy and just the right amount of royal determination. Catherine de' Medici entered the world in 1519 as part of Florence's powerful but scandal-prone Medici family. Technically, she wasn't inbred by Habsburg standards, meaning she had a few non-cousins in her ancestry. However, she quickly aligned with dynastic traditions by marrying into the French royal family and producing a lineup of monarchs who often married within familiar circles. She married Henry II of France, not a blood cousin, but a close political match. Their marriage united Italy's wealth with France's military might and merged Medici ambition with Bourbon drama. Catherine arrived in France with minimal influence, a suspicious accent, and the unwelcome presence of Diane de Poitiers, her husband's very public mistress. Unfazed, Catherine spent a decade quietly building alliances, mastering court politics, and expanding her family, having 10 children, many of whom married cousins, proving that while she wasn't born a Habsburg, she learned to parent like one. When Henry died from a jousting injury, because nothing says medieval masculinity like dying from a sporting accident, Catherine became Queen Mother and the most powerful woman in France. Her sons, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III, each took the throne in turn, with Catherine guiding them from behind. She was devoutly Catholic but politically adaptable, which in 16th century France meant sometimes supporting Protestant weddings, and, at other times, orchestrating the mass murder of Protestants at those same weddings called St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Her reputation took a hit after that, even for a queen who strategically married her daughters into Europe's major dynasties. Catherine was blamed for everything, from the religious wars to the court's decadence and suspicious poisoning incidents at royal dinners. Yet, she was also a patron of the arts, a brilliant strategist, and somehow kept the Valois dynasty limping forward through constant turmoil, rebellious nobles, and royal banquets that likely required food tasters and plenty of wine. She passed away in 1589, politically drained but still scheming, leaving behind a generation of royals who bore striking similarities to one another and ruled with a mix of charm, Catholic guilt, and an unwavering dedication to marrying within the family. In ancient Greece, falling asleep wasn't just about rest. It was considered a sacred act, a bridge to the divine. Nowhere was this belief more literal than in the Asclepian dream temples, dedicated to the healing god Asclepius. These weren't cozy inns or small shrines. They were expansive spiritual centers where the sick, the weary, and the hopeful came, seeking not just healing but transformation. Before attempting sleep in these sanctuaries, visitors underwent ritual purification, fasting for days, bathing in sacred springs, offering animal sacrifices, and abstaining from sex and impure thoughts. The goal was to cleanse body and spirit before incubation, a sacred sleep where healing visions might appear. Inside the abaton, a dark, enclosed chamber, people would finally lay down on stone slabs or animal skins. Flickering torchlight cast shadows, priests whispered prayers, and incense filled the air. Sleep here was a deliberate descent into another realm, and dreams were seen as direct messages from Asclepius, offering symbolic or sometimes clear guidance for healing. Dreams of snakes slithering over the body were considered auspicious, as snakes symbolized rejuvenation and divine intervention. Non-venomous snakes were often allowed to roam freely in these temples, especially in the sleeping chambers, where people willingly slept among them, seeing it as a divine honor. In the morning, temple priests, acting as dream interpreters, would help visitors understand their visions, sometimes prescribing herbal remedies or lifestyle changes, while in other cases, the dream itself was believed to be the cure, realigning the soul and body. The Greek dream temples show us that, for ancient people, sleep wasn't merely a biological function, it was a mystical journey, a conversation with the divine, with the potential to transform fate. In ancient Egypt, sleep wasn't just the absence of wakefulness. It was seen as a temporary death, a time when the soul would leave the body and journey through spiritual realms. To guide this nightly journey and protect the sleeper, the Egyptians developed sleep rituals that combined mysticism and medicine, deeply woven into their cosmic worldview. Before bedtime, especially among priests and the wealthy, elaborate routines were followed. Incense, particularly frankincense and myrrh, wasn't just fragrance. It was sacred, believed to purify the air, repel evil spirits, and attract divine favor. The rising smoke symbolized prayers ascending to the gods, wrapping the sleeper in protection. Chants and prayers were recited aloud or whispered privately, acting as spiritual shields. Deities like Thoth, god of wisdom and dreams, and Bes, the dwarf god protecting against nightmares, were invoked. Images of Bes, with his fearsome appearance meant to ward off evil, were often carved onto headboards or painted on walls. Bedrooms were treated as sacred spaces. Beds were elevated, often made of wood or woven reeds, and sometimes embedded with amulets for protection. Headrests, though uncomfortable by today's standards, were used to align the soul with the stars during sleep. Sleep direction was also significant. Many oriented their beds toward the rising sun or constellations like Orion, linked to Osiris and the afterlife. Those seeking deeper spiritual insight or troubled by dreams might visit temples dedicated to Serapis or Imhotep for dream incubation rituals, similar to the Greek practice. There, through chants, incense, and oils, they would prepare for sleep, seeking divine guidance in their dreams. For ancient Egyptians, bedtime wasn't about comfort. It was a carefully orchestrated spiritual practice to harmonize the body, soul, and cosmos before drifting into the sacred realm of dreams. In ancient Babylon, sleep was considered both sacred and perilous, a time when the thin line between destiny and dreams nearly vanished. For Babylonians, drifting into sleep wasn't a passive act. It was a realm where omens, spirits, and divine signs could shape their futures. They held dreams in high regard, so much so that entire professions were dedicated to them. Dream priests, known as Shelu, specialized in decoding the visions that came to both the powerful and the ordinary. Before lying down, Babylonians often conducted protective rituals, hoping to attract favorable dreams while keeping harmful spirits away. They believed that gods like Marduk and Ishtar could send messages through dreams, but so could demons and wandering spirits. To guard against these negative forces, they wore amulets, placed protective tablets beneath their beds, and drew magical symbols around their sleeping spaces, a kind of ancient spiritual security system. At sunset, they would burn incense made from juniper, cedarwood, and tamarisk, not just for its scent, but as a way to cleanse the air and welcome divine presence. For Babylonians, sleep was a chance to communicate with the divine, and a clean, sacred space was essential for this nightly meeting. Many recited night prayers or incantations asking for clear, truthful visions and protection from false messages while navigating the dream world. Those seeking guidance on crucial decisions, like going to war or getting married, might sleep under the open sky or in temples, a practice known as dream incubation, hoping for dreams so vivid they would guide them by morning. When these dreams came, they were recorded on clay tablets, sometimes accompanied by sketches. Over time, Babylonians created dream dictionaries, cataloging symbols and their meanings. Dreaming of a lion could mean victory in war, while dreaming of drowning might signal betrayal. These texts later influenced Greek and Roman dream interpretation, and for Babylonians, dreams were far from trivial. They were sacred messages from the gods, read each night by those who performed the right rituals and rested under divine favor. In the ancient Vedic culture of early India, sleep wasn't just a necessity, it was a cosmic journey. The Vedic scriptures, composed millennia ago, described sleep as a sacred return of the soul Atman to the universal spirit Brahman, with dawn marking its rebirth. Like any sacred act, entering sleep required preparation and mindfulness. One key aspect was pranayama breath control, teaching individuals to slow their breathing before sleep, not for quick slumber, but to align themselves with the rhythm of the universe. This practice wasn't considered superficial. It was seen as essential for the soul to travel peacefully during the night. Disturbed sleep, according to Vedic belief, could lead to confusion, spiritual imbalance, and bad karma, making nightly rituals vital. Many recited Sanskrit mantras or hymns in the evenings, seeking divine protection while they slept. The Gayatri mantra, for instance, was often whispered while facing the setting sun, asking for clarity and guidance. The sleeping position and direction mattered greatly. Sleeping with the head facing north or south was avoided, as these directions were linked to death, while east symbolized knowledge and west symbolized rest. Bedding was made from natural materials like kusha grass, cotton, or animal hides, believed to influence the purity of dreams. Herbs and oils played their roles too. Ancient Ayurvedic texts describe using warm sesame oil massages of Abhyanga before bed to calm the nerves and relax the body, preparing it for deeper rest. Incense and infusions of ashwagandha, brahmi, and tulsi were used to encourage lucid, insightful dreams. Dreams themselves were seen as mirrors of inner truth, influenced by karma and desires. Troubling dreams were taken as warnings of spiritual imbalance, and interpretation often required the guidance of a rishi spiritual teacher. In Vedic India, sleep was not an escape. It was a reunion with the eternal self, wrapped in breathwork, mantras, and sacred intention. Within ancient China, particularly in Taoist practices, sleep was more than a way to recover energy. It was a spiritual and energetic recalibration, aligning the body with the cosmos. According to Taoist teachings, the body was filled with chi life force flowing through channels known as meridians. If this flow was blocked, sleep would be disturbed, so bedtime rituals focused on maintaining and balancing chi. Pre-sleep routines included mindful eating, breathwork, and adopting specific postures. Sleep wasn't simply about feeling tired. It was about tuning oneself to the harmony of heaven and earth. Taoist monks practiced Qigong, a series of slow, mindful movements paired with deep breathing, followed by meditation to calm the Shen spirit believed to reside in the heart. An unsettled Shen, due to emotions, poor diet, or noise, was thought to cause nightmares or restless sleep. The sleeping environment was carefully arranged to support energy flow. Beds were made of bamboo or wood. Headdress were firm to maintain body alignment, and rooms were kept clean and simple, emphasizing energetic hygiene. Sleeping positions mattered. Lying on the right side was thought to aid digestion and enhance dream clarity, while the direction of the head and feet followed geometric principles, aligning with cosmic energies similar to early Feng Shui. Dreams were seen as journeys of the Han ethereal soul, which traveled through spiritual realms, while the pure physical soul stayed with the body. If someone woke feeling drained or frightened, it was believed that the Hun had been attacked or lost during his travels. Protective talismans and cinnabar charms were placed under pillows for safety. Taoists viewed dreams as more than subconscious images. They were diagnostic tools and spiritual maps, guiding the individual's energy and karma. Done properly, sleep was seen. Among the ancient Celtic peoples, from the mist-veiled highlands of Scotland to the sacred oak groves of Gaul, dreams were viewed as gateways to the otherworld, a mystical dimension where spirits, ancestors, and phi beings walk. Although fewer written records remain compared to other civilizations, oral traditions and Roman observations reveal that the Celts considered sleep a sacred act, a moment when the soul could wander into realms unseen during waking hours. Rituals surrounded this journey. Before resting, individuals often recited protection prayers or incantations to ward off harmful spirits and invite clear visions. Sacred herbs like mugwort and vervain were burned, their smoke believed to purify the sleeping space and open pathways for dreams to guide them. Sleeping positions mattered. Many aligned themselves with sacred sites, hills, or stone circles, believing these places thinned the veil between worlds. Bards and druids were sought after to interpret dreams, treating them as messages that could reveal hidden truths or foretell events within the tribe. Dreams of animals held meaning. A white stag could signal a spiritual journey, while a raven might forewarn of challenges. These dreams were shared around communal fires, woven into stories, and sometimes used to guide tribal decisions, including when to migrate or when to prepare for conflict. For the Celts, dreams were not escapes, but bridges, connecting the living with the realms beyond, teaching them about courage, prophecy, and the rhythms of the earth. And so, across Babylon, India, China, the Americas, Mesopotamia, and the Celtic lands, one truth remains. Sleep was never just sleep. It was a ritual, a risk, and a doorway, an invitation to the divine, to wisdom, and to the parts of ourselves we often forget while awake. Every culture, in its own language and rituals, understood that the night was alive with possibility, that within dreams, there were teachings, warnings, and blessings waiting for those willing to listen. So the next time you close your eyes, remember, you are stepping into a tradition as old as humanity itself. Sleep well, dream deeply, and may your night be your guide.